You don't build a 15-story building by accident. You do it with intent, with scale, with vision. And now the government has made that intent crystal clear. Build up or step aside. Auckland Council is being told no more dithering. Around key train stations, you're going to go vertical. The minimum height, 15 stories. Shockwaves, one of New Zealand's most provocative economic minds, is here to decode what policy shift means for value, yield, and the next generation of investment plays. What does that mean for the suburban investor, the developer, and the land banker?
Financial freedom faster. Financial freedom faster.
If you like watching other people make money, keep scrolling. But if you're the kind of person who wants the edge, the insight before the headlines, hit subscribe. Because in 2025, more New Zealand investors get their housing intel from this show than anywhere else on YouTube. The smart ones already know, and now you do too. Showmobile, how is the government going to change the zoning and policy to be able to make houses more affordable for New Zealanders?
Yeah, so housing has become unaffordable in New Zealand over the course of the last 40 years. So we should not expect an easy and quick turnaround. And so the kinds of policies the government is pursuing, this government and the last government, has all been about how do we make it easier to build more homes and how do we get more infrastructure into the ground. Those are the right things to do. And it means that we're going to have more density, we're going to have more greenfields, but things have to really kind of come on stream. But because we have underbuilt for such a long time, and it's something like 47 out of the last 50 years, we haven't built enough homes, we are going to take quite a long time to catch up to this accumulated shortfall. So any kind of improvement in affordability, I do not think will happen in the near future. This is a dream for something that will probably happen for our grandchildren rather than for our children.
And what specific zoning changes or specific policies that you like can help bring about that change faster or with more certainty?
Well, look, as an economist, I'm fairly agnostic. To me, supply just has to improve everywhere. So what I want to see is a small amount of density uplift across large swathes of the country, especially in places where we have infrastructure capacity. So we're not having to build additional infrastructure to be able to supply that additional housing. But when we think about where the opportunity is in terms of quick wins, it's very much around transport corridors and transport nodes, because that's where you can upzone really quickly, you can get a lot of density in, and you can add quite a lot of new housing and not add those additional pressures in terms of traffic and other things. So I think we do have to be a little bit clever. I think it is about more supply of everything, but I'd love to see more typology and particularly a lot of focus around those transport corridors and nodes.
Well, we have seen a lot of council level resistance to building bigger buildings and they like to spend money on pretty things rather than the infrastructure and doing the jobs themselves. How do you see, the effectiveness of government kind of forcing changes down council's throat, essentially? This week they've just rolled out forcing 15-story, 10-story properties around train stations. Is it just that the government just has to force changes now?
Look, I think it's that tension between local democracy versus that overall New Zealand view. So I think as an idea, New Zealanders want to have more houses, but they just don't want it there. Just not in this bit here, right? Somewhere else. Do it in somebody else's neighborhood. And so there's a little bit of nimbism that goes on. I think that's entirely natural. That's very human. So I don't think we should use that as a pejorative term. I think it is very much a human thing. So there is an element of, I think sometimes you just need a little bit of central government and coordinated kind of action that says, look, there are some things we're just going to do. Let's just go ahead and do it. Let's not screw around with this kind of these local kind of fights, because once you see it, it's actually going to be okay. There are lots of other places around the world who've got big buildings around train stations and people are fine. But it's not just about those 15-story buildings, right? We can't have just 15-story buildings because that won't solve 50 years of undersupply. We also have to build single dwellings. We also have to use terrace housing and all those other bits in between, all those bits of typologies. And I think that's why we need to try and take the councils along, because the reality is if you piss them off too much, they'll fight you at every single turn. And we can't do that. We need council and central government and the developers to work together, because this is for all of us. This is not just for one group to say, I want this one thing and let's make it happen.
Yeah, the lawyers always win, and at the moment it seems like the bureaucrats are pushing paper and winning too.
Consultants is a very lucrative gig in this environment.
Is Kiwisaver investing into infrastructure the answer? We need more of the New Zealand money circulating in New Zealand.
Look, Kiwisaver investing in infrastructure is part of the answer. And the reason I say that is Kiwisaver is a pension asset. So it's very good at investing in assets that are also long-lived and also have predictable long-term cash flows. So they can't invest in everything. They're not good for example, taking on lots of risk, like building a big motorway on a crappy bit of land, right? So that's not what Kiwisaver is good for. But if you've built the asset and it's got an income, for example, a toll road or a toll bridge or a tunnel, absolutely, Kiwisaver would be absolutely wonderful. And so Kiwisaver presents a really big opportunity. At the moment, we don't invest a lot of Kiwisaver into infrastructure, but in other countries, it might be 17% to a quarter. So quite a large amount. So in New Zealand, Kiwisaver is currently about $120 odd billion. In 50 years' time, it could be somewhere between $2 and $6 trillion. So the amount of money that we could invest into infrastructure to meet our infrastructure shortfall is a real opportunity. I'm pretty excited. I think we will do this, and government's already starting to work in that direction. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I'm really excited that we don't have to live with the infrastructure shortages that we see today, because New Zealanders' savings will very soon start fixing those problems.
Well, what countries are doing the infrastructure investment well? Is it when you make it bipartisan or non-political that you start seeing actual things happen?
Well, I mean, across the ditch, the Aussies have done it really well. So they will have huge fisticuffs about which kind of infrastructure plans they're going to put in place. But generally speaking, they're fighting about the infrastructure plan in 5 years' time, not the one that's taking place this year. And so I would love for us to maintain that political confrontation, because that's where good ideas take place, right? You need to have the confrontation so that we're not making bad decisions. But we can't be having fights about projects that are about to take place, because that creates uncertainty, it sets us back, and all those other bits and pieces. So look, around the world, they have found better ways of doing things. I don't know if you've seen, but Infrastructure Commission just put out a really good report on the pipeline of projects that they think are just good for New Zealand. And so there should be no contest. When there is a list of projects that are just good for New Zealand, just go and do it. Take the politics is done. Move on. Just commit and do that.
Was it time for the government to start paying developer contributions, or a bigger part of it? Say, for example, in Drury, there was talk about contributions being put from 30 grand up to 130 grand or something. Projects don't happen because they're too localized, the cost is too much. But should the cost be spread across everyone?
Yeah, so I think development contribution is a funny one, right? In the sense that I think you do have to have marginal pricing that's accurate. So if it costs $500,000 of infrastructure in the middle of nowhere, then we probably should send that signal that don't build here, it's really expensive. But if we've got places like the city center where there is already a lot of existing infrastructure, why are we adding all these DCs that discourage people from investing in places where there already is capacity? And so I think therein lies an opportunity. But also governments can subsidize those DCs or other fees when they get something they want in return. So in the UK, for example, they give you bonus densities, or they offset some of these fees. If you say, for example, in your development, a third of it goes towards affordable housing. So we can always do these kinds of trades to make sure that when we are giving some kind of incentive, we get something in return that solves these other problems that we're dealing with, like our massive housing subsidy problem.
And how do we balance the risks for investors who jump into apartments or mixed use? We talk about housing being a human right. You're talking about providing some properties that are more affordable. How much of it do you let the market be free market versus controlling with policy?
Well, look, New Zealand actually has a relatively free market, right? In the sense that we have policy settings that tend to be quite hands-off. We tend to be quite hands-off in one side and then quite hands-on in others. And it's the lack of coordination that's the problem. So I think if we're going to provide support, we should get something in return. So my sense is that, rights and responsibilities go together. So if you're going to ask developers to do something, you should compensate them for that with either some planning gains or some subsidies or whatever it might be. But make sure you get something in return, right? So it should be fair in the rights and responsibilities that are being traded. So I don't think it can be too blanket. By and large, for the 90% of the housing market, the market works okay in the sense that those settings can be good. But there will be bits of the market where I think we need to have intervention, and especially around things like affordable housing, around social housing. Those are not places where you can make good money as a private investor. So government needs to lean into that and just deal with it.
If you look 20, 30 years in the future, you're going to start investing lots of money as a property investor into certain property assets. Where are you focusing your attention? You're going to start advising friends and family? Are you going to read the infrastructure reports, or are you going to pick a few zones and go for it?
Look, I can't give a personalized financial advice, but I think there is a real gap in the market. And that gap in the market is the independent retirement living for older people. At the moment, it's the choice between living in your own home or in the normal rental market or in retirement villages. But there is a really big gap in the middle around those certainties and securities of retirement villages, but more like a build to rent. I think that aspect of the market is going to grow massively over the course of coming years, because we know that more older people are retiring without their own home. Some of them will want to downsize and they don't want to go into retirement village, and there is no option. So there'll be these new creative solutions that will come from the changing demographics of New Zealand. And I think those are going to be really exciting, because the early adopters, I think, will have lots of upside for them.
Well, yeah, I mean, based on some of the numbers I've seen you put out, it takes like 26 years for the average family to save for a deposit and 60 years to pay off a home. So we really got to start to think, okay, housing as a right, but home ownership's not a right. And that being a country of renters is the norm.
Absolutely. Housing, in my mind, like the tenure of it is less important than the quality of it, right? I think what we want is people to have the ability to live in a place where they have some sense of being home, that they can raise a family, they can be part of the community, and they don't fear being kicked out, unless they're being terrible, in which case, absolutely fine, you deserve it. But so, you know what I mean? So I think it's about making sure we're able to bundle up those rights without necessarily having that capital outlay, and making sure everybody in the process is rewarded. And I think it's entirely possible. We should not think that it is a pipe dream. I think it's entirely possible and within our grasp.
Well, thanks for your insights today, Sean Bill, and we will catch up again soon. Appreciate the stuff that you're putting out on the Simplicity channel, and keep fighting the good fight, man.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
This channel's growing faster than your equity. Too blunt? No, just honest. You think your portfolio is solid? Then imagine what it looks like with an edge. Information isn't power, action is. Subscribe and get dangerous, or keep playing it safe while others don't.